Welcome to the Yeoman Podcast. I'm your host, Geoff Graham. On Yeoman, I'll speak with people who build and grow things, who create art, and who think about community, meaning, and purpose. Today is Saturday, February 10th, 2024, and this afternoon I'm joined by Austin Tunnell, a builder, a mason, a CPA, and the founder and owner of Building Culture. Austin and his team are building what he rightly calls multi-century buildings in Oklahoma City. Their structures are indeed built to last, both aesthetically and structurally. In addition to building things, Austin is a thinker of thoughts and an asker of questions. You can follow him on Twitter at Austin Tunnell. You can listen to him, listen to the Building Culture podcast. And I also recommend you follow his company at build_culture. I have many questions for Austin. Among them, why was structural masonry once so common, and why is it now so rare? How was he persuaded to trade his green visor and keyboard for a hammer and trowel? And why does beauty matter? I'm sure we'll get into other things as well. Austin, welcome. You are my very first guest. Thank you, and please be gentle. To get us started, tell me about your business? Tell me about the company's name, Building Culture.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, Geoff, and I'm glad to be your first. This should be a fun and easy conversation. So it's always easy to talk to people who share values. Great way to start with the name of the company, Building Culture. So it's really a double meaning. There's the building culture, as in the construction culture, and that's something that we really need to work on this in this country. And you could think of that as kind of like the bricks and sticks and the technology and how we think about things and the industry and where things are going, what kind of materials are being made. Yeah, the construction apparatus and industry. And that's a very important part of the equation if you want to build a more beautiful, durable, thriving world. The other part of the equation, though, is building culture. It's the act of actually facilitating the creation of culture. And the reason, it's interesting because this name, what was I think it was 2016 when we came up with this name. And, I even knew back then it's kind of this tension of both. It's both the bricks and the sticks and the culture. But over the past, 8 years or so of doing this, I've become increasingly convinced it's actually more about the culture and less about the bricks and sticks. And we do have to work on the bricks and sticks because we've literally forgotten how to do things. That's why I was in Spain, 5-6 months ago, studying some of these old techniques that we've literally forgotten. But the problem is, if you don't have a culture that's willing to open its eyes to something new and different, it doesn't matter what you remember how to do or what you can do, because you really have to have the people in the society and the culture that values it, that understands it, and is willing to support it. Mm-hmm. So a lot of my focus is now kind of, in some ways, in terms of messaging, is shifting a little bit towards this idea of culture, while at the same time pushing all of this really cool construction stuff forward. And really, they're kind of intertwined to me in the end.
Well, I wanted to ask you about your team, and the culture totally ties into that. So building culture, tell me about the current state of the business. Like, who are the employees? Yeah. Who are the people you're building things for? What are you building for them? All that sort of thing.
It's a great question. And we're rapidly evolving, and we're small. Okay, here's the thing. I know that people that follow us might think we're really big, but honestly, it was really mainly just me. And of course, lots and lots and lots of help. Houses and developments don't get built on their own, period.
Many hands make light work.
Yes. So when I say by myself, I really mean that within the entity, building culture, and who's doing the insurance and accounting and designing and drawing and management and just everything, right? And for a while, that was me until about 2021. I started off with a partner actually in Carlton Landing that was so helpful. But it was really hiring my first employees in 2020 or so. And now we're to a group of, I've got a full-time architect, a guy that moved down from New York who had been working
Matt
at GP
Hayes,
Schaefer,
right?
Matt Hayes, Notre Dame trained. Just we get along so well.
So to briefly interrupt you, sorry, I listened to you and Matt talk on the Building Culture podcast. And for any aspiring architect out there, before you go to architecture school, go listen to that podcast. So we'll probably come back to that topic, I think. But I'm interested. So Matt Hayes is on the team.
100% though about that. I agree with that. Listening to that. So Matt Hayes, full-time architect. We've got a really awesome guy, Graham, who's a construction staff. My wife is helping with social media. We've outsourced our accounting to some really a specialty group that's really part of our team, Andrea and then we've also got Thomas Dougherty, who is another Notre Dame, and he's remote. He's outside of Philadelphia, but he's our lead urban designer, and he's so talented. So we've got a group of about 6 people, but very passionate people. Matt moved here, Graham moved here. I'm not even from here, and so it's people that are really aligned. We've got different perspectives, but really aligned in values and vision and what we're doing, and it's really amazing because it's been somewhat accidental in some ways. For example, and it's shaping how I think about building culture and how building culture will grow over time. Because when you're doing everything, well, you're just doing everything you have to because you're figuring it out and you don't have money and all that. But then, you find someone that's actually better at that thing than you are. And you're like, oh, well, okay. Well, you do that. If my vision is to create the best building culture I can possibly create. So it's right now I'm in this transition of me kind of stepping out of this idea of, I very intentionally called it building culture and not Austin Tunnell design or something, because I really want it to be an idea that can persist over time. It's not about me. It's just that I'm the keeper of the vision right now in my role, Yeah. So with that team, we are in the past, what I've been operating at is a design build company. I've been building spec homes and I've been building custom homes. That's never been kind of the ultimate goal. I really always wanted to move into development. I've got a CPA background. I've got a financial background. I think that way. It makes sense to me. But I really wanted to, when I was considering this 8 years ago or 8 years ago or so, I was thinking, do I go to school and become a developer? Do I go work for a developer? Do I go get my construction management degree? Do I go to architecture school? Whatever. All these thoughts going through my head. And, I'd seen these communities, Seaside, and of course I've traveled and stuff. And a lot of the things the new urbanists are doing is just really incredible. And they've been working on this for 40 years. And so we're in a completely different place of potential there, but something that's still lacking, and it's not anyone's fault, it's just there's so much work to be done, is the ingredients. And what I mean by that is I think of our built environment, the recipe is the urbanism and the buildings are the ingredients. And just like a meal, you need both if you're going to have a good meal. If you've got a great recipe and mediocre ingredients, you're going to have a mediocre meal, or vice versa. And so what I would say is in a lot of new urbanist communities, and I don't mean everyone, right? There's some great architecture. But I'm not even just meaning the architecture. I also mean the durability and the methods and means of doing it. So I was thinking about, I really want to understand the ingredients and how to build so that we can build the best ingredients possible, then mix that with design and urbanism, and then mix that with development where we're truly controlling everything from a vertical integration standpoint, because the developer, as you know, controls really ultimately everything because they control the dollars. And so that's what we're moving into right now, is a truly develop, design, build. And that's our first project coming up here in Oklahoma City. I say first, our first big project. It's a $30 million project. It's a big project for us, our biggest by far. And it's a little over an acre, 49,000 square feet. And we're putting 20, lose count because it's always shifting slightly. It's about 60,000 square feet of building. And it's mostly 2-story and 3-story townhouses around all these inner courtyards. And then some mixed use building at a really wonderful human scale. And it's going to be so cool. I mean, it's
Do you have a name for it yet?
Come true. Townsend. And that's kind of a local, there's some history to that.
And do you have any inspirational inspirations for that?
Gosh, well, I wouldn't say, yes, I would say there's so much inspiration for it. I wouldn't say, hey, there's this project out there that we were inspired by. I think there's a lot of projects. One of the things that I love about Notre Dame, and I did not go to Notre Dame, but I'm with Matt and Tom and Anthony Catania is also collaborating with us on this. Is the first thing that they do is any new project is let's go look at precedent. And I don't hear that from any other architect talk about, and they'll spend hours putting together, looking at things. It's not because they're trying to copy something. It's to see what's worked and look and, and then for me, I've traveled, I look, I see, I watch, I take pictures and so then it was, okay, we've got this size of lot and you're having to decide demographics, because it's, you're mixing art and science with economics when you're putting one of these developments together. And so we're kind of having to think through all of those things. But I would ultimately say the inspiration for it is to redefine urban living a little bit, and it's particularly in Oklahoma, but I would say even perhaps across the country. A lot of, very understandably, because of the development that's been happening for the past, 40 years, 100 years, whatever you want to say, that's so placeless, that's so like almost anti-community. Everyone's kind of saying like, let's build community. And I think that's great. That's important because, that's what we're about in terms of building. It's about people and building relationships and things like that. But I think we have, in some ways, this kind of immature idea of community because we don't really know what it is. And I was informed by living in Carlton Landing in a T&D, a new urbanist community. And my wife and I lived there for 4 years from 2016 to 2020. And I knew more people there. I knew more people there than I had at any other time in my life, probably since college. But what I noticed was not that I was best friends with everyone, because you can't be best friends with everyone. Like, you're busy. You've got work, you've got life, you've got family, and you've got a few friends that you're going to invite into your home for dinner, make plans. But the thing about Carlton Landing is we didn't make plans. Like 99% of the time, it would just be on a Saturday, we would just head down to what we would call the meeting house, which was the local coffee shop and pub. Mm-hmm. And some nights it was really quiet, and other nights there would be like a few hundred people there, and there would be 6-month-old babies and 85-year-old people and everyone in between. And there's beer, and people are out there having fun, but it's also family friendly and wholesome. There's parks, where we just play spike ball and volleyball on Saturdays, and it lets you have all these connections with people where, I'm playing spike ball across someone that I might fundamentally disagree with on like everything in life. But we're able to laugh and high five and have fun together. And it creates a bond that I can't explain it scientifically, but there's something there of just knowing totally and being known as you walk around. And so when I'm saying that is, it's not like community is, we're not advertising this acre of like, come live here and just be best friends with all your neighbors and like eat dinner in the common area every night together. I don't want to do that. That sounds like a commune. And I'm not saying a commune's bad. Some people want a commune. Yeah. And I think you could have communes inside new urbanist communities if you want. That's great. This is more saying, hey, just because you live next to each other doesn't mean you should be best friends, but it does mean you share some values because you're living here. And what are those values? But we're also really trying to balance that idea of privacy, and you're living your life. And it's not about the big things. It's not about ostentation. It's not about these grand, luxurious, a $20,000 diamond chandelier, crystal chandelier. No, it's about all the small moments and the small beauties in the everyday life, because in America, we make everything about the individual thing, the big thing. It's the Christmas time. It's the big vacation. It's the cruise. It's the basketball game. It's the weekend. And I'm like, those are too few of things if you want to live a really rich life. If you want to live a rich life, it's got to come back to the everyday and the small things. And so that's really kind of the message. And I'm saying that's for that project, but that's really like permeating throughout building culture now, is the things that we're talking about. So that's a lot of our inspiration is how to make everyday life more beautiful.
Can I ask you some kind of, I guess, industry specific related stuff about Townsend? Sure. Like, so it's roughly an acre.
Yep.
What are you building on that? I think you said 60,000 or so square feet. Is that right? And yes. So what is in that? Is it townhouses for sale?
Yeah,
products,
we've got 12.
Retail?
Yeah, and I should say everything. Yeah. We're pro forming everything for sale, and we may put together buyer groups on a couple of the commercial side, but everything is for sale. There's 12 straight up townhouses that are 2-story between 1,200 square feet and 2,000 square feet, and they're almost all 2-bedroom. Why? Across the country, this is true, but I'll give you the statistics in Oklahoma, even though this is generally true across the country. Can you guess? And you might know this, but like the percent of households that are 1 to 2 person households, like what proportion of the population do 1 to 2 person households make up?
No idea. What is it?
So most people will guess between 15, 30%. It's pretty small. Maybe some people will say 40%. It's actually 60+%. In Oklahoma, it's in where we're building, 62%. Right. So it's saying 62% of households are 1 to 2 person households. If you expand that to 1 to 3 person households, it's 77%. Mm-hmm. What that tells me is the product that we're building, all being 3-bed, 2-bath out in subdivisions or 500 unit apartment complexes downtown. Mm-hmm. Those are kind of the two extremes that we like to build. We're really not building for the demographics. And so that's what we're targeting. We're calling it like, I don't really like the word luxury, but it's like the idea of luxury in a smaller box kind of thing, because you don't need 5,000 square feet if you're a 2-person household. You could live in 1,200 square feet and have really beautifully curated spaces. So 12 townhouses. Then we've got multiple live-work units that we're going to be selling. And then we've got some commercial units too.
So the live-work, will that be kind of first floor retail, office?
First floor commercial, second floor
neighborhood
could be residential
kind of
or office right now, but we're kind of seeing what the market would want. And an interesting thing here is, Geoff, is we're actually we are turning it into portions of it to a condoizing it. Why? Mm-hmm. It's not a condo building we're doing, like some big condo building. The reason we're condoizing it is so that we can sell off small spaces to people, because we're building in urban infill and on expensive dirt, and new construction is just extremely expensive now. It costs us 40% more to build today than it did pre-COVID.
Yeah.
And I've heard that just everyone I talk to.
Right.
So, housing is 40% more to build today. People aren't used to that yet. The land is very expensive. And then we're building more quality than people are used to. So people don't understand that. So if you were to go to a small business and say, hey, rent this 500 square foot for, I don't know, $45 a foot, here, that's a lot of money. But if you were to say, hey, go buy this 500 square foot thing in this unit that's going to be your office in this beautiful courtyard in this great neighborhood that's part of a larger growing community that is downtown Edmond, that's a very different economics in your mind. If you're a small chiropractor, architecture practice. And the reason is we're doing this is all of our commercial is small. 1,000 square feet, 500 square feet. And we got a larger building too. And I don't mean there's not a place for larger stuff, but we really want to focus on local businesses. Now here in the location, I don't think a bunch of retail is going to work for us right now. So we're not targeting retail. I think in 5-10 years, I think retail could work really well there and be a great little boutique space. And I would love that, but that's not where the market is at. So that's kind of where we're trying to meet the market where it's at, but also not watering down our vision too much. We're not watering down our vision at all, really. So that's a couple of the things we are doing.
So have you closed on the property yet?
Yes, we own the property, and we've been going through this for about 10 months. We're in the middle of raising funds. We're about like 60% through our raise. We're going through the city.
How will you finance that? Is it equity and debt? Is it?
Yeah, it would be equity and debt. Where we're bringing in. Right now we're raising $3 million, and we're at about 1.8 million. And what we're going to do, it's a $30 million project, but we're phasing it into 3 phases. So if you imagine that equity, we build phase 1, call it 10 million a phase. So 3 million of equity, 7 million of debt, build, sell. Each sale, an investor gets a small portion back, on each sale of the profits, but it's actually going to be quite small up front, and we'll scale up over time, because we're not giving back all the equity on a sale, because we're actually rolling that into the second phase and filling up the guidance line at the bank, you could say, back as we sell, fill up the guidance line, do it again. Of course, we're not there yet, going to try to aggressively pre-sell, because, we might be able to get our guidance line at the bank raised so we can actually build a little faster. But right now I actually don't want to build faster, because I want to, we do it in 3 phases that are all kind of complete places, so that if, you build one phase and like all the houses are facing each other, so it's not like someone's looking at an undone structure on the other side. And that's how we're thinking about it.
You don't really know yet. It'll be hard to know what the value is until it is built. And so if you pre-sell everything, you'll surely be leaving a lot on the table.
Yeah, when that's and see that's a very good point. Where there's that balance of managing risk, but not cutting the legs out of your upside.
Sure.
And so we expect this to break ground later this year, because we're working through. We've been working with the city extensively.
Did it require a rezoning? Was it fully entitled?
No rezoning, because it was central business district, but we do have a few variances, and then of course, just building as densely as we are, the codes are not meant for this kind of building, so we've had lots of obstacles, but the city's really working with us to make this happen. And we're not going to get everything we want, but we're going to get a lot. And it's been a really nice, there's some really wonderful people in the city helping shepherd this through.
Well, I imagine it helps. Well, one, I'm really encouraged. I will tell you, 30 years ago, when I was it 30, yeah, 30, almost 30 years ago, when I was beginning my career in real estate development, to do something different in the family of this, what you're doing, it was really hard to get it through entitlements, especially hard. And something that makes me especially optimistic right now is historically that had really been the big bottleneck to doing great projects. It wasn't because the market wasn't there. It was because of rezoning took 3 years, and you might not get it. And I feel like it's getting easier and easier as the people who are working in planning and zoning departments and the people who make up the board members, planning commissions, and things like that. They're attuned to what will really make their city or town great, and are more excited about projects like the one you're like Townsend, what you're getting underway.
Yeah, there's definitely a growing amount of people, but it's still the minority, I would say, in my experience. People in city councils, in the engineering departments, and now actually I think the bottleneck is a little bit once cities have actually gone about fixing their zoning, which is difficult, and I mean most cities still need to go through that. Like that's just step one. But step one, fixing your zoning is not going to fix everything. People tend to think that fix your zone. Well, I say people tend to think that. I don't know if that's true, but now I like
to blame everything on zoning. I'm big anti.
Yeah, right. Like it's like you fix zoning and it's still like we got a lot of problems to work through. But now I think a lot of it's ending up on the engineers and the municipalities and the public works departments that are holding things up because of their easement requirements,
utilities,
on sewer lines.
Oh my goodness!
And it's not like they're thinking about it, right? Like if you're like, I'm trying to, if I'm in a sewer, and they're just like, we're requiring 10-foot easements on everything because that's easy for them. And so like that's all they're thinking about is what's easiest for us. And I understand why, but that's not the way to think about it if you're a public works either. It's and so I think we really lack a lot of vision for just nationally of what's possible. And that's still, we really need, that's why I love the Strong Towns message. It's all about, rather than this kind of like top down vision coming down, it's all about bottom up vision. And I think that's really what it is, because then it's based on relationships and people knowing and understanding. And then you get one compelling project out there, and then suddenly things get easier and easier and easier. And that's why this stuff can't just be replicated, because it is about you knowing your city councilors in the city and working with people and then building that relationship. And the next time it gets even easier, right? And that's the same with us. And so that's why I really want to plant roots here and work in our backyard so that we can actually get better at this, and actually create better partnerships with the city and really get some things done.
So how close is this to, I have known about Carlton Landing and the great work that's being done there by so many people for since I guess the beginning, but I've never been there. So does the work done there and around there by you and others, plenty of others, and I want to talk about some of those people too, surely that's made this process easier with the city. Surely they're aware of your work. Is that right?
It's interesting. There's the select few people that it does make a difference, but they're kind of generally already on board. But a lot of people, and I'm not talking specifically because I really don't want to call out names or anything like that.
Sure, anyway, totally.
I'm just kind of talking about my experience across, because once again, we're working through the city really well here, but I'm just kind of making a general comment here. The people in the public works and the city engineers and traffic engineers and electric and water and gas and all that and trash, they don't care at all. They care zero. And so I don't, it's kind of like, why would they care? Because they've never been educated about it. They've never been talked about it. It's not a vision. It's not a priority in their municipality, in their department. They're just running this, this small business, and this is how it's been done for 100 years. And you're coming to me with all these crazy ideas that are going to be more expensive and change things up. And no. And by the way, they can say no because there is no competition to go, so it's kind of one of those things that's it's going to take some pressure to get people. But at the same time, so in some ways, there's a group of people that just doesn't matter. You can show them all those examples. It's not going to matter. But at the same time, there's another group of people that I do think it's extremely helpful to have the examples. that they can see and experience. And a lot of times that's buyers too, because if you're going to go in Oklahoma, which is very, suburban sprawl, bigger houses and things, as you make more money, people get pretty big houses. And if you were to just go around and knock on people's doors and be like, how would you like to live on a smaller lot in a smaller house with a maximum 2-car garage closer together and pay twice as much per foot? They'd be like, hell no. But then they go and experience Carlton Landing and they go, oh my gosh, their mind's blown because their kids just run out and their kids can't wait to get there. And the parents get to actually have an actual vacation or get amazing family time. So it is so valuable to have great examples out there. And I just mean there's still a group of people that need to be reached that does not reach. And I have not figured out exactly how to reach those people yet.
We had, and this was years and years ago, we were pursuing our entitlements for ION in the mid 90s and ultimately got those in 97, 98. And as challenging as the rezoning process was and to get permission to build it, then afterwards we had a similar challenge I think you have, which is getting everybody else on board, the water and sewer together, and storm sewer letting us co-locate those easements, things that were but we had this, I suppose, a great advantage. I would have thought it would have helped more through the rezoning process, but it actually didn't help us very much there. But we could point to the old village of Mount Pleasant in downtown Charleston where these organizations were continuing to service infrastructure and had been. We're like, well, we have it there. It's kind of a pain in the butt. And over time, though, we probably got lucky, but just with the right people there at the right time. The fire chief was incredibly supportive, and that could kill a project or kill a bunch of great details. But we got all those people on board, and we're able to co-locate easements. The fire chief at the time, it's like, well, I can drive my trucks all around historic old Mount Pleasant fine. So as long as none of your turning radiuses are narrower than those and none of your streets are any narrower than those, that's fine with me.
Wow. That's pretty remarkable.
And you just don't get, that was, so it was.
No, that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
And then that's another challenge, by the way, in fire is just the fire trucks are the size they are. I mean, you can get smaller fire trucks, but all the fire departments had these big ones. And so that kills so many projects.
Yeah.
And a lot of people get mad at the fire chief, and I can understand that. And I'm sure I can get frustrated depending on what their response is. But at the same time, they're running this organization. These are the fire trucks. They would have to go raise money. It's a lot of work to change. It's not just let me go get a new fire truck. It's got to be city funds and people to agree on it.
Totally.
It's hard. And that's why
I remember while we were pursuing all these things, I was very young and went to Italy with a couple buddies, and we were essentially dirtbagging it around Italy, and we went over to the island of Capri. And which, have you ever been there?
I've been to Italy a few times, but we never went. We never went there.
So it was so cool, and we were riding up the bus that I remember thinking about the fire trucks and the utilities, and while I was over there, the bus that we were on that rode us up to the top of the village up there was a super narrow bus that only had seats on one side. And because the streets were so narrow, so they designed all their vehicles to match the streets, not the other way around. And we passed by a fire truck, and it was a little tiny, little narrow fire truck.
I talk about that all the time. You can see what Japan has a lot where they'll have very mini trucks, and they'll have double wheels, so they can the turning radius is just ridiculous. And some of them have faces on two ways. So you can drive, you're not going backwards. You can go forwards in either way. Exactly what you said. Design the fire truck to fit the way we want to live in the streets. It is so unbelievably crazy to design the fire truck and then make everything else fit that.
Yeah.
But that is the world we live in terms of all these hyper
specialized
decisions.
And it's the world that the fire chief has to deal with too. That's
right. Exactly. They're working within the system that we've created or that has been created. And so people are making the best decisions they can with, not always best decisions, but a lot of times people are just making the best decisions they can given the environment that they're in. And that's why all this stuff, in my opinion, is so hard.
So this is your first, I guess you've done custom homes and spec homes, and and this
a
is your
small
first
development
larger
in Carlton
scale.
Landing. It was like, that was more like a $3 million project where we bought 3 lots, replatted into 6, put it around a common green.
Yeah.
So, but this is by far the biggest. And I've got a
That's
partner
really
I would like
exciting.
to mention, Matthew Myers. He's older, in his 50s. He's an experienced investor.
You interviewed him, didn't you?
Yes. He was on the podcast.
Yeah. I've started that one, but I hadn't gotten.
He's just wonderful. I mean, just great podcast there too. But he's really my kind of, he's both a mentor and a business partner, you could say.
Mm-hmm.
And he's really let me run with it. In terms of all the designing, he's like, I want you to learn how to do development and raise money and all that. So like, he's making me raise money. And like, I've gone to him a few times and been like, I'm out of people to talk to. And he's like, I'm not letting you off the hook that easily.
Oh man.
So I have to get
well,
back
that's
out
great.
there.
How great to have,
it's
someone.
Perfect. Right. Cause then that way I can move forward with confidence, and I can move forward with real confidence and also have someone that I'm always going, it's going to keep us from stepping in it,
Right.
So it's really just an amazing setup.
I want to, and maybe this is a little out of order, but I want to go back to structural masonry, which is, I gather, sort of what drew you into the building industry and away from being a CPA. Is that right?
It kind of started with urbanism first, because I moved down to Panama when I left my KPMG job, and I was introduced to new urbanism for the first time. And I read Suburban Nation while I was down there, and that completely set me on a new path. But when I was in Panama, I also happened to meet Clay Chapman. He was down there for a week. This is 2013, and I was interning down there. And he came down
Clay
for a week.
Chapman, who is. When did he move to Carlton Landing? It was before that, right?
2015.
Oh, so it was right around that time.
He moved 2015. He was in Georgia. So when I met him in 2013, he was still in Georgia.
I was looking for a funny story about Clay. I don't even know if he remembers this, but I was designing a fireplace for a random project I was working on. And I was like looking for ideas about it and found a cool picture on Flickr, I think. I was like, oh, that's cool. And I saw that it was in Decatur and it was an active job site that he had going on. And I was like, oh, well, I'll just go over there and check it out. And Clay was there and he gave me the tour around and it was super cool. And,
that's awesome.
And we just met randomly and I was like, oh, that's great. I'd love to stay in touch. He's like, well, I'm about to move to Oklahoma. So see ya.
Got it.
But we did not make at all the connection about new urbanism. We did like none of those sort of things. And then years later, I guess probably with Twitter, maybe I was like, oh, I know that guy.
Right. Oh man, his chimneys and fireplaces are just so utter works of art.
Yeah. So you met Clay in Panama.
Yeah. And then he and then I went off to the Peace Corps because it was kind of like lined up for me. So I was gone for 2 years, and it was good because I needed to explore that to make sure, like when I left KPMG, I'm like, what do I want to do? I had no idea. I didn't even know about urbanism or anything. I went to Panama and found out about that for the first time, but I was already on my way after that to Uganda to do the Peace Corps. And I was thinking, do I want to do the UN or something? But thank goodness I did the Peace Corps because it convinced me. Well, it was very enriching in a lot of ways, and it absolutely convinced me I did not want to do the Foreign Service or anything like that. And so when I got back to the States in 2015, I'd been reading those 2 years about urbanism and building. And it was just like, this is what I want to do, but I don't know how to get into it. But that's when I was saying, do I go back to school and become a developer, designer, architect, whatever? And that's when I called up Clay. Because I didn't even fully understand at the time kind of the importance of what he was doing, if that makes sense. Like I knew it because I sensed it, but I couldn't articulate it in the same way because I didn't know enough to articulate it. So I called him.
I love Clay. So can you share what it is that Clay's doing and what he has been doing?
Yeah. So Clay is building. A lot of people know him as 1,000-Year House. I think on Instagram and Twitter and stuff. Yeah. And Hope for Architecture, and he's a true artisan, craftsman, mason, builder, designer, and he really pioneered bringing back structural masonry, kind of a very lost art. And his first ones were in Georgia around that 2013 time, I think, 2012, maybe a little early, 2011 or something. When he birthed it, when he had his first, when I got to Carlton Landing, he was on his third structural masonry house, so pretty new to it. But he'd been building his whole life. He's in his 50s now, but he had been building barns since he was like 7. I think his first structure was like some timber frame barn when he was 17 that he figured out how to do by himself. So he's one of those guys that he's a perfect 0 to 1 guy because he has the experience to figure something new out and to bring something back, and so he had a bunch of all his projects building. He had all these leftover bricks, and one day he was like, what if I just built something in my backyard? So he was collecting them, and he built this tiny little artist cottage in his backyard in Decatur for, I don't know if it was a storage shed or his little design office, and I mean very small, like it was maybe 10 by 10 or something like that. And he was looking at it and going, oh my gosh, who wouldn't want to live in this? Like, it's stunning, it's beautiful, and all it is brick. Like, it's just brick and arches, and all his friends loved it. And that was really the seed. That plus he built a lot of barns in the day, and he would come back years later, just 5 years later, and they would be beat to hell. And because horses on a barn are like dog years, like, because they make a mess of it. He's like, I hate that my buildings are getting beat up. How do I make them more durable? So he built a barn out of masonry. That was
explain structural masonry versus what most people see as masonry veneer.
Right. What you see today when you see a brick building is some kind of wood structure behind it, and then a single layer of brick, which we call a brick veneer, because it's really acting as a veneer. It's not the structure itself. And in fact, the 2x4s, the 2x6s behind it are actually holding up the veneer. Versus structural masonry, which is really what we were doing prior to World War II as the primary method of building, is when masonry, whether it's brick or stone, you build it in such mass and such width that it begins to become self-stabilizing. It's like if you're standing up and you stand with your feet really close together and someone pushes you from the side, you're going to push over really easily. That's that would be a single wythe of brick. And it's called a wythe, Wythe. Mm-hmm. And that just means a single kind of layer of brick. Now, imagine spreading your feet out 3 times as wide, and then someone pushes you. It's going to take way more force. And so usually that starts happening. A brick is it's 3 5/8. We'll call it 4 inches. And so then a double wythe wall is 8 inches. And you can do lots of garden walls and things like that with 8 inches. But a house and buildings are usually 12 inches or more. And you can even see pictures of wall sections of buildings in Ukraine, and that are getting blown up, frankly. And you'll see the triple wythe wall section on there. And there's different ways of doing it throughout the world, throughout the country. And actually 12 inches in triple wythe is quite thin historically. Mm-hmm. A lot of, if you're in Europe, a lot of those buildings might be 2 feet thick. But 12 inches is plenty on 2 to 3 story buildings to get the structure that you mm-hmm. need.
So Clay was doing this, and there's a lot of, this is was novel still novel for the time, but he was bringing back structural masonry in new construction, which is kind of quixotic, but but people think totally it's beautiful, and people were like, "Hey, I would like to own that or buy that," or
Right. People are immediately like, what I've noticed, whether it's Clay houses when I was apprenticing or ours, people are struck by the authenticity of it, I think, and the beauty, the simple beauty of it, and this idea of, there is a simpleness to it. And it's interesting because right now in America, we love exposed brick. Some of the most expensive places, whether it's a loft in Manhattan, or a coffee shop or bar or something like that, has exposed brick. But throughout the rest of the world, if you're in Uganda, for example, where I was for a couple of years, everything's made out of bricks because they can just make them locally and mm-hmm. bake them in the sun and build their little huts. And the poorer people would leave their brick exposed. The wealthier people would plaster over it, because that is kind of a status of, right? You've got the money to plaster over it. Plastering over it's more expensive. My point here in saying this is I find it actually really fascinating. And I'm really into the exposed masonry in a lot of ways. Although I will say I actually like a little bit less in my house. I don't want every wall being exposed masonry. I want some, I like moments. Yeah. But anyway, I really think like our kind of American, like we really love it because it just feels real. And we're so surrounded by inauthentic, by just marketing, by mm-hmm. pretending, by this faux kind of like luxury. Everyone is an aristocrat or something. I don't even know how to quite really get to the depths of it, but I really think there's a reason that it calls to us particularly in the United States.
So you came to apprentice with Clay, what, 2016,
2015 is when I got down there.
Yeah.
And I think I was 26 years old.
Yeah.
27.
Were you married at this time?
26. Yeah, I got back from Uganda because I met my wife there, and we had a 5-week engagement, and then we moved down to the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma. There was like 40 houses in Carlton Landing. My wife.
Where is she from? You're from Houston, right?
Yeah, and she's from Pittsburgh girl.
Okay, gotcha.
She was the first person I met off the airplane. And I was like, hey, I made a good decision. That girl's pretty.
High ROI on that.
Yeah, I was like, this decision to go to the Peace Corps is a great idea. It's working out quite well for me.
Yeah.
She ignored me though for a while.
So you and your new wife arrive in Oklahoma City for you to embark upon your new career as
in Carlton Landing.
Oh, in Carlton Landing. So
which is actually quite a big difference because literally this is 2 hours from a city, and there was, I think, 40 houses at the time, and like 10 people living there full time, including Clay and Grant Humphreys and them, and then like a few others, the sales team, and then us. We couldn't even afford to live in Carlton Landing at the time. We got back from the Peace Corps. We had no money. We were living in Eufaula, the closest town, and is 400 a month square foot house. And I remember being so happy about it because we've been coming from Uganda where we did have running water, but we didn't have hot water, and we didn't have washers and dryers, and I don't think we even had stovetops or anything like that. Electricity was always out. So just like that little spot, there was only like one little window air conditioning unit. It was a shotgun house, and we would eat every meal in our bed in that middle room because that was where the unit was.
Oh, that's so
funny.
Great.
Is like I remember it, and it was like it's funny, and like I kind of cherish those moments in some ways. But then within a year, we actually found a small apartment in Carlton Landing, a garage apartment that was being built. We ended up moving in there, who ended up being an investor in building culture that helped me get started.
Oh,
and all just completely unknown. I had no idea at the time. Really a lot of moments of a lot of help that I've gotten over the years, and a lot of moments, you call it luck, I guess you could say, but it's like, I also, it's more than that though. It's these moments. It's like life surprises you sometimes. Like you're just going, and sometimes it feels kind of monotonous and boring. But if you're actually like pursuing something and going somewhere and trying something, boy, something can come out of left field and change your life. And I've just, it's just the longer, like looking back over the past 10 years, I'm just looking at all those moments in my life and going, wow.
It's providence,
all the little miracles,
serendipity,
magic moments,
whatever.
Yeah.
I feel like the longer you stick at something, like part of it is just being able to endure and keep sticking at it. But the longer you stick at it, like these, every now and then these little inflection points will emerge that will totally kind of lift you up and point you in this great new direction, provided you keep working at it. There's a lot to be said for perseverance.
There is. I've learned.
Yeah. So when did how long did you work with Clay?
2 years. That was kind of the deal. I'd say that's the deal. It's kind of a handshake. Okay, you're going to do this. Are you going to go out? Are you going to come work? You got to do it for 2 years. Okay. And are you going to go out and do it on your own afterwards? Yes. Okay. That's kind of.
So Clay and I are not, I don't know that we've ever occupied physical space together. But I totally love him on Twitter. I make all these, all these delightful people I've gotten to know on Twitter. I actually don't. I mean, I understand it in the abstract why people hate on Twitter, but I'm like, God, I've met the most wonderful people. I really, really have, and I only follow the people that I want to follow, and they're just great. But
I agree.
What was it like to work with him?
I wasn't there to make money. I was making $12 an hour in my late 20s, working hard outside with my hands, laying brick and being on roofs and doing
up on scaffolding. I mean, the pictures I was scared of shared during that time.
I mean, it was not easy for me. And by the way, I was very sick when I came back from Uganda. I'd had malaria multiple times. I had worms. I had all these parasites. And so I was actually
tell us more about that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I was truly I think very sick in a way that's kind of hard to understand from modern medicine diagnosis. Cause it's although I really was quite sick. So that made the physical work actually even harder on me. But once again, I wouldn't want to do it again. If you were to be like, go do that again. I'm like, oh my God, no. But to get to where I am again today and to actually know how to do these things, oh my gosh, I would not trade it for the world.
Yeah. Where else could you go to learn that.
Yeah.
Like
and there's nothing like learning how to do something. And that's why I backed into design, actually, as I learned how to build and everything I'd be able to design. But then I started thinking about, crap, I'm going to have to make a living for myself after this. We've got no money. And so then I started designing a house. Well, what am I going to do? I'm going to design something super simple that I can understand and wrap my head around, because I actually have to go build it. Like, I don't know about this whole world of architects and GCs and how the world works. Like, I know what I'm learning with clay and building a house physically.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, okay, well, I'm going to actually copy. Just like if you're learning to play music and instruments, you start learning to play a cover, of someone's song, and then you start adding your own notes and things like that. Before you know it, you're composing your own music.
Yeah.
So those first houses, I kept them very simple. They were rectangles, very easy proportions. They kind of fit. They honored the limitations of the materials I was working with. For example, masonry. So I wasn't doing cantilevers or something. It was a very simple building. And then I figured out, oh my gosh, that building's actually quite beautiful that I just designed. It took me a long time. But I recognized at the end of it, I was like, this is actually good. This is beautiful. And I had no idea that I could even do that. But what I realized is that beauty is actually so much more accessible than I thought, because it's actually not that complicated. Now, great works of art, that's a different thing. But I think all of us have that ability to just tap into basic ideas of beauty. And that comes back to proportion and things like that. And I don't mean there's one version of beauty. There's lots of different, it's a complex topic.
Well, I've seen that. I've seen that first house. It is beautiful.
I just posted it. Yeah. I'm kind of like having a moment of thinking back over my past 11, 12 years.
Yeah. So, Austin is an excellent, Austin and building culture, both are excellent follows on Twitter, just for the beautiful stuff, not just the thoughts that they're sharing, but it's beautiful and humble. There's nothing remotely ostentatious about the house, but it's totally beautiful and simple. So I really love that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So then you started your own building business, and how'd you get a first customer?
I moved into a garage apartment during my apprenticeship, and then I started talking with the owner, and I never asked. He was asking what I wanted to do afterwards. And I was thinking I was going to have to go convince some customer to build a house with me which was kind of scary. And he decided to be like, well, I'll help you start your business. I'm looking to help some young guys. So I got helped earlier on in my life. So I'm looking to help some young guys get their business started. And he actually put me, instead of just investing with me, he put me and this other builder together and said, y'all go do it together. And I came up with this concept for the Bend, the Pocket Neighborhood, or I think it was, I don't know, between the two of us, we came up with that. And then we kind of had, I was doing building culture, which is the brick stuff, and he had his houses he was doing kind of under his own brand. But what was so nice about it is I was working alongside another more experienced builder than me to learn from, the things that I didn't know. But we did our first project was a development project. And I laugh at myself because I would not do something like this again, is because as I was worried about building one house and then this happened, I was like, let's go build the whole development of 6 houses, and then that was a lot to bite off in terms of just stress, you could say.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Did y'all do all right? Did it work out? I've seen pictures.
Well, it would have worked out really well. The first 2 houses, we had offers on them, cash offers, months before they were closing, and the Carlton Landing market tanked halfway through. Where by the time we were doing
what year was that?
2019, maybe.
Okay, gotcha.
Right before COVID. Before COVID, it was not doing well, and there was something like 42 houses on the market out of 200. So a quarter of the houses on a market. Doesn't matter how beautiful something is.
Right.
If a quarter of the house on the market,
just don't have the
people
absorption.
aren't going to pay. So we actually ended up having to pause our project until, it was it did not end as well as I had hoped. One of those things with development, you can't control everything.
Experience teaches. Yeah. Well, you had, it sounds like it didn't destroy your business.
No. We were okay. We were able to keep going and make it. It was definitely not a payday.
Yeah. I want to come back to something you describing learning the trade and then applying that to designing your house. and it reminds me of things that you and Matt got into in your discussion of architecture, and a discussion I feel like I have every 5 minutes with people who, when we talk about the industry and the state of architecture. But it is astonishing to me that one can become an architect and never have built something or spent time on a construction site. And it especially astonishes me, having, hired young architects to do things, and they have not been taught. I don't lay this fault at their feet, but they have never learned how a building goes together. It's kind of astonishing to me. And Matt does a great job of sharing, like, how to actually learn about a building and how it goes together. And I don't know, would you, so the path you've taken, can you make the argument for architecture school for someone, or would you?
I really want to be generous because I don't know, the conversations that are happening in departments and all that. And I don't like to just make general statements to throw things under the bus, or I try not to, but boy,
you're a very positive person.
When it comes to architecture school, I don't know how to say, like, obviously there's good programs out there. So, right, there's always going to be things Notre that Dame. Fall out of what I say.
Yeah.
But boy, the vast majority of, I am utterly disgusted by. It is almost criminal. And you're right. I don't blame this architecture students coming out of it. And then and by the way, there's great architects out there, but it's because they did the work to become great themselves, or got lucky and went to Notre Dame or something like that, or a couple other of the schools. There are a few other schools now that teach something, but no, it is. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. Like there almost seems like a larger. I can't even understand the why behind it. Like, how has it gotten this bad, and how are they teaching these kinds of things and not teaching? They don't teach anything, not only about construction or building, they don't teach anything about, well, one, they separate off everything. They separate off, the engineering is in the science department, the architects are in the art department, the developers are in the business department, the trades never go to school anyway, right? Or yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of making a general statement. So when everyone's completely separated, and in architecture school, you really are like, they treat it more like, one, either an art, or two, an art form in that, like, we're creating sculptures, we're creating these like egocentric starchitecture, like sculpture. But that's the thing about architecture. It is not a private art that someone's going to buy because they like it and put it on their home. It is a very public art. And I think Samuel Hughes has the most amazing article on like architecture style. And I forget what it's called. I could send it to you later, but he talks about, he compares it to architecture as a public art. Like if music, if you were just going to blast music across your entire city 24/7, you would want that music to be very easy to listen to. You'd want it to be beautiful and soft. And so I say soft, I don't know, he didn't use the word soft, but that idea of like easy to listen to and largely agreed upon that it's good. And then also architecture literally is the human habitat. Like it is the stage with which we live our lives. It's the civic space, the public space. None of that even enters the conversation of architecture school, that it's about people and what does it mean to be human, and what does it mean to live a good life, and what are the things that lead to a rich life, and what are the things that don't, and how do we help facilitate that? Like as architects, it's both a very sobering and humbling profession, I would say, and I would say in development and what we do too. And that you cannot create human flourishing. No matter what you do, you can create the best neighborhood in the world, get everything right. But it's up to the people in the end that move in. They have to create the culture and the relationships and the people and all that. And I think that's actually quite beautiful. But at the same time, it's very sobering, because as developers and architects and all that, we can build the hardware so bad that we can prevent people from flourishing. And it happens all the time. I can give you a bunch of examples in Oklahoma City where we, drove a highway through and cut off utilities the other side, and it just destroyed the possibility of people even be able to flourish. They're just in perpetual poverty. So, I just think that the architecture profession, and I mean that in a very large sense when I say the architecture profession, anyone involved in the built environment, I think first and foremost, they should actually be like humanists first. And I don't mean that in some like,
they should love humans.
Yeah. And I don't mean that in some like liberal way of like humanist and it's all about like pleasure or something.
Yeah.
That's not what I mean. I mean, it's about humans though. And how are we not talking about that? Like, it would be like being a doctor and never talking about the fact that the people you're working on are humans. Like just pretending like you're working on, inanimate objects or something, like dissecting a tree. And you're like, no, these are people.
It'd be like
treat people differently than trees.
Be like being a doctor, and the reason you do it is to do the treatments, not to promote health or healing or well-being.
And beauty doesn't even enter the conversation,
What's that? Say that again.
Beauty doesn't enter the conversation.
Oh, yeah. We need to talk about
controversial.
Beauty. Goodness. Yes, and it's controversial. Why is beauty controversial? Why do you think?
I've heard many things. I've heard that it's not inclusive enough. I've heard that, of course, it's completely subjective, that there is no such thing as beauty. There's almost people that like, I feel like there's almost this like spit on beauty kind of thing, that it's this outdated, antiquated idea. Which is just astonishing to me. But
I wish I can't remember. I either read this or someone told me this, and I can't. And so this is not me, but so I thought it was brilliant. It's like, people are like, oh, beauty is subjective. And I'm like, no, beauty is not subjective. Beauty is a real thing. And beauty is like, it's like a smell. Like there are putrid smells that everyone thinks are putrid. There is the smell of something spoiled or rotten is nobody wants to, unless there's something wrong with you. Nobody wants to eat that or smell that or taste that. Beauty is very much the same way. There's beauty is a thing.
And we can prove with science. People agree on what's beautiful, largely speaking. There's always going to be, the bell curve, right? I mean, I kind of treat everything as a bell curve.
The visual preference tests and things like that.
80% of people like agree on what's kind of beautiful. And they even say like they want more traditional fabric buildings. It doesn't mean modernism is bad, by the way, or like there's not great modern buildings or that we don't have space for those things either. It's just that, once again, kind of the fabric of our cities, we really want to be easy to listen to.
Well, I do have,
on beautiful.
As and I haven't been, I took not entirely, but essentially a 15-year hiatus from the building industry and went into software with a software business that served the building industry. Stayed a partner in real estate development, but was not actively doing stuff for a long time. And so I kind of I stepped away from construction, architecture, and development, not entirely, but a bit. And then I came back to it, and I would say I'm real optimistic about it. Like the tenor of the ridicule of beauty that was commonplace 20 years ago, it was just, the whole notion to say that there is such a thing as beauty would be ridiculed. The idea of traditional architecture or vernacular architecture or classicism as things that are relevant to today was widely ridiculed. You were just a crazy person if you were doing this kind of stuff in the late 90s or the early aughts. And now I feel like it's really just kind of the pointy-headed academics who are really the only ones that remain intolerant to it. But just generally, culture-wise, there's some people in legacy media are sort of still intolerant of these things. But on the whole, people are like, oh, yeah, it's time for us to build beautiful things again. I think that's widely shared. Yeah.
Right. No, I think that's a great point. Actually, that's even helpful to be reminded, you're... I think you said you're 50, right? So you got a little bit of years on me, and just being reminded of like even what was the world like that you're recalling, and that it's actually gotten better towards that. I love hearing stuff like that.
The number of practitioners like you, architects,
right,
builders, like the number of really talented artisans, architects, builders, developers, designers, and I would even say artists more broadly, even just people making art, sculpture.
Yeah, there's people increasingly appreciating that.
It's going way up. It's going
people
way,
working
way
with
up.
their hands again. Totally. The whole shopcraft is soulcraft thing. Yeah, no, I think that's what I love about all this is I'm not hopeless at all, because there is such a counterculture. And that's when things get bad enough, And this is what I actually kind of like when things get bad enough, because if things stay too even, you don't get the strong counterculture movement. But when things get so bad, you get, people really passionate that start banding together to create something different and kind of like create a new system and not try to just reshape that system, but create a whole new system in a sense. And I think that's what's been happening, starting with the new urbanists in particular. And you've got this group of people, and it's a small group, like we barely know each other, but we also immediately recognize we share a lot of values. And then there's kind of this tight knit thing. And what I like about that is I'm learning that it's not just about the end product. For example, our downtown project that we're working on. Yes, I cannot wait to finish it and complete it and have people move in and have events there and celebrate it. And that's just absolutely wonderful. But also I think there is a great beauty, you could say, to the process unfolding over time, over 5 years, and what happens in the time, and how did we go about it, and what are the relationships that we made, and what people did we talk to and inspire, and that we were inspired by, and what things did we discover. And I just mean, there is so much value just in the process of doing it that it's a little bit less about just the end product to me now, and increasingly more about all that we learn and do, and kind of to lift people up too, including ourselves along the way.
So well said. And I've kept you for a long time. You're really generous. I think that's a great place to wrap up this conversation. Austin, please, if you will, please remind folks where they can learn more about your work and building culture. Yes,
we largely are on Instagram is a great one, at Building Culture, or at Austin Tunnell. And then we're also on Twitter /X as another fun one. Mainly that one's me, Austin Tunnell. And then YouTube, Building Culture.
Good.
On YouTube. We kind of put all of our stuff too. And then we've got a podcast on Spotify and all that. So
yeah, listen to the podcast. I'm gonna have you on, Geoff. I really listen to the podcast. I'd love to do that, but listen to the podcast. It's really great. Cool. Thank you, Austin Tunnell. You're really great. I'm encouraged by the great work that you guys are doing. And I hope you will return to Yeoman. Thank you.
Yes, I'd love to. Geoff, glad to be your first guest, and really happy that you're doing this. I love the concept, and I look forward to talking to you on my podcast so I can learn more about you. So
okay, I love that. All right.
And your story.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Geoff.